Hi, this is something I've been wanting to do for about 2 weeks now. Horrible that my last video was almost a month ago, an inescapable nightmare of a month. Anyway, today we'll be coding a slider like the one seen right here. We have the label, we have the slider value, that 38, the actual slider, and finally down here the ruler, going from 0 to 100, split into 10 major segments. So let's put all of this into code. And I'm really sorry, but this is going to take a lot more time and effort than my normal geometric demos because it requires setting different styles on different elements manually, step by step. It's not something simple and logical that can be generated within a loop, 10 lines of code, poof, done. It's a lot more complex, but I hope you'll bear with me or monkey around with me. So we are going to begin by setting that value to 38. We are going to put everything within a form. We are going to have the label, I think it was price range. Input is going to get type range, and it's going to get a value set explicitly to that one right there. Okay, you can see how it went slightly down, and that's because by default, if we don't set a min attribute, the range minimum defaults to 0, and if we don't set a max attribute, the range maximum defaults to 100. And without setting explicitly this value attribute, it's the range value defaults to the dead in the middle between the minimum and the maximum. Dead in the middle between 0 and 100 is 50. So it went from default 50 to 38, so slightly down. Now next we are going to create this output element, which is going to contain the slider value, and we're going to want to tie both this output element and the label to the input. To do so, we are going to add an ID here on the input, and then on both the label and the output we are going to set a for attribute that references that ID. Now they are tied to the input. Next we are going to want to create that ruler, so we are going to set the number of major segments, and 10, and then a unit. We're going to need a unit. The unit, the major unit, is going to be the distance between two consecutive major values. So the distance between 0 and 10 is 10, the distance between 10 and 20 is 10, so we could just set the unit to 10. But we could also compute it from the minimum or start value and the maximum or end value. Now, we assume that we may or may have not set a minimum and a maximum. So minimum and maximum, these may have been set, may not have been set. We don't know it. But we are going to set a start equivalent for the minimum, which is going to be the minimum or the default 0. So if the minimum was set explicitly, then it's going to take that value. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. And in a way, we could do the same for the end maximum value, right? So end is going to be max or the default 100, and this works just fine in most cases. However, we might want something like minimum minus 10, maximum 0. So if the maximum is 0, 0 is not a truthy value, and 0 or 100 is going to give us 100, which is not what we want because the maximum was explicitly set to 0, and if the maximum was set explicitly, we want this end value to be the maximum, which was set explicitly, not the default. So if the maximum is a truthy value or the maximum was set explicitly to 0, then we use the maximum value. Otherwise, we use the default 100. Next, we compute a range. And this is the difference between the end value and the start value. And then we have the unit, which is the range divided by the number of major segments, n. Okay, now to create the ruler, we are going to have, I cannot type. And I'm really curious, have you used this element? I am actually going to link to the MDN page for it, and I'm going to link to all other necessary resources, but I'm curious if you've used it for this or for something else, because I've honestly haven't used it for anything else other than slider rulers. And we're also going to need to link this to the input. And again, we're going to use an ID, but a bit differently. We're going to set the ID here, and here we're going to have a list attribute that references that L ID. And here we're going to have a loop for I going from 0 all the way up to and including n, increment this I at every step, and create option elements. And in these option elements, we are going to have a value that's the loop index times the unit. And let me just show you the compiled code, because you can see we have 0, 10, 20, and you can see those tiny lines there, right? They are placed at the right positions. And I just want to show you something else. If we didn't tie this to the input, then you're going to see how those tiny lines just disappear. So that's why we need to tie it to the input. And one more thing I want to explain why I'm putting these values inside the option. And by the way, if we can display them if we just set display block, because by default it's none. Okay, so we can display them. Safari doesn't want to show them in any situation. We can set display block there, but it doesn't work in Safari. So the ruler just isn't going to show up in Safari, which is a pity. And I don't know if there's a bug for it open. I am going to file one if there isn't, but yeah, just so you know. So what I wanted to tell you about the option. This has two attributes, value and label. So label is what gets displayed if we actually display it visually, right? And the value is what the form submits. Now, if label isn't set, then its value is taken from the element's text content. If value isn't set, its value is also taken from the element's text content. Now, we want to have value and a label, and we want to set them to the same thing. But instead of setting them both to the same thing, we set the text content to this, because their value gets taken out of the text content if they're missing. Okay? Now, a few more tiny things here. We are going to want to pass the minimum, right? And we are using the start value because let me just show you the compiled code for now. You can see how it's 0, right? But if we were to use min, then that's undefined, okay? However, here, we are going to use that because if min is undefined, then this attribute is just not going to show up in the compiled code. Okay, so here we're going to use the start because we want a 0 value. Here, it's just not going to show up and it's going to default to 0 anyway if it's not there. Okay, and similarly, and the max as well, using the end, and here we are going to use max, and also we are going to pass the number of major segments. Okay, so like this. Now we can move on to CSS, where we already have the colors that we are going to use for the track right there, and I picked them out of here because I thought they were pretty colors. Okay, so seriously about layout. HTML, body, form, everything within a form, right? They're all going to get display grid. And one thing that's annoying me, we don't want those option labels one on top of the other. So we're going to set grid autoflow column like this. And we're going to make the HTML full height like this. And then on the body, we are going to set place content center, right? And then something like a basic reset. So something like this. Margin 0, padding 0, font inherit, right? I think I'm going to want color inherit, but we're going to see about that. I'm not sure. Let's actually do it. Color inherit, right? Okay, and we're going to explicitly set a font here. So font, line height, and a fallback. Okay, so something like that, and it looks ugly for now, but yeah, we are going to take care of things later. Now on the form and option elements, we are going to set place items center. And in case you're wondering about the difference between place content and place items, let me just show you graphically. So place content positions the entire grid within the grid parent element. So with purple there, you have the parent element. That's the total surface area of the parent element. The grid is positioned within the element. In this case, center, it shrinks to the minimum necessary space in the center. Now, in this case, place item center, the grid stretches all across the parent element. And what gets positioned in the center are the individual grid children in the center of their cells, right? You can see how each grid child shrinks to the minimum necessary space within the center of its own cell, okay? Within the center of its containing cell, if you prefer it that way. Next, what else? So for example, we are going to want to display that value, and we're going to use the output. More exactly, we are going to put it in the content of an after pseudo. So I cannot use a keyboard, and we cannot do this because content expects a string, and this is a number, so we cannot convert this number to a string. So we're going to use the counter trick. So here we're going to have counter reset, right? We are going to set this counter to the custom property, and here we're going to have counter function, and now we should see that 38. Okay, now for both the label and the output, so elements with the for attribute, we are going to make the text thicker, so font weight, right? And for the label, we're also going to want the font bigger, so font size, something like that. Now something else right here for the output, we're going to want to position it above the input, so it's going to be grid row 2. So on the first row we have the label, on the second row we're going to explicitly position the output, and then we're also going to have justify self start, right? So it's nicely there at the start, and then we are going to move on to setting dimensions. So for example, for the track dimensions, a track width, track height, and a thumb diameter, right? Okay, now having set these, we are going to track width, and this is going to be the minimum between the base track width, because we want to have something responsive, and I cannot spell. and the full viewport width minus twice the thumb diameter. So something like this. And then we're going to compute a track unit. And this is basically going to be the base width for one of these option elements. So this is going to be the track width over n, the number of major segments. So now here we're going to have option, and we're going to have that width is that track unit. And now you can see the more interesting things, how those are in the middle. Let me just show you with the box shadow. So 0 for offsets and blur, something like this. Now you can see how the text is in the middle of the option element, because on the option element we've set place items center. Okay, now the next step here is going to be setting a width, and initially we're going to use that track width like this. Okay, one more thing, we're going to want the middle of this to be aligned with the end of the track of the, the slider, the end of the slider, the left end of the slider, and with the middle of the output. So we are going to set here a transform, translate, and we're going to have calc. So that's going to be half the track unit, right, minus 50%. And now you can see how those two numbers are middle aligned, right? Okay, now let's move on to prettifying the input, which is something I really don't like. And you are just going to see in a moment why. I hate writing this stuff. Oh. So this, and something similar for the thumb. I hope I spelled everything right, right? So, appearance none. And here we're going to set the background. Let's say it's going to be linear gradient, green, red. Horrible, but yeah. Okay, and we are going to place it in the middle, and we're going to use the track width. You're going to see in just a moment why I'm not using 100% when I've set the width to the track width. We are going to change this for the width, and we're going to want this to be in the middle, right? And then track height, no repeat. Okay, let's see it, and we're going to want to have at 90 degrees, something like that. Okay, now you can see it, and then we're going to want to also make the thumb visible. So mixin thumb. I'm using a mixin so that I don't have to write the same code both for WebKit browsers and for Firefox. So here, first off, border none, because Firefox has a border by default, WebKit browsers don't. So just make everything uniform, right? And then we're going to set a width, thumb diameter. The same thing for the height. And here, background, current color. Okay. Now, having done this, we are going to take this and include thumb, and then something similar for Firefox. except we need to change the prefix, and slider becomes range. Thumb. Oh, I cannot spell mixin. Okay, now you're seeing it. And you can see how I'm now moving it, but this value doesn't get updated. And one more thing, if JS isn't enabled, because we're going to update the value via JS, if JS isn't enabled, then we don't want to display this output value anymore, because we can't update it. We update it using JS, and if JS isn't enabled, then there's no point in just seeing the same value as we're moving the thumb. Okay, so we are going to use a trick that I explained in a two-part article, which is called dry switching. So the difference of one declaration is the first part, and fallbacks and invalid values is the second part, and this is the trick that I'll be using here. So we are going to set something like this. We're going to set display JS none. Now this has a fallback of none, so now since we haven't set this JS custom property anywhere, right, it's going to take the value none, and output is going to get display none. But if we have a JS class on the HTML, right, and we set here JS to 1, then if this is 1, then 1 isn't a valid value for the display, and the output is going to get displayed as it would normally. Okay, so now from the JS we're going to have document element, which gives us the HTML element, class list add JS. Okay, so having done this, we are going to see that value right there. And as for updating it, we are going to have add event listener input. So first get the target element, event target, and then get the parent node, which is the form, right? Style set property. So basically we update that value property, custom property, right? And this is it. This is all the JS that's needed. Okay, so now we are changing this, and you can see, right? Nice. Okay, something else I don't like, and I'm going to show you right now. Let's set here opacity 0.5. Let me show you something else here. Now, you can see how we have that triangle pointing towards the 38 value. So the tip of the triangle, right, is on that 38 value. So the middle line of the thumb is aligned with the middle line of the value, and right, and here you can see how they're not at 0. You can see how they're not aligned. It only goes to there, and this is because this thumb only moves within the limits of the content box of the track in Firefox, and the content box of the actual of the content box of the track in WebKit browsers, and the content box of the actual input in Firefox. Now, we just don't have margin, border, padding on the track, and its content box coincides to that of the input. No issues there. But the thing is, since we've set the input to have a width of track width, which only goes up to there, right? The content box starts there in the middle of the first, so it's on the line that's the middle of the first option element, right? And it ends on the line that's the middle of the last option element. So we need to actually extend this input by a little bit, and only leave visible this part. So we need to extend the input by half a thumb width or thumb diameter in one direction and a half in the other direction. So half plus half, half in one direction plus half in the other direction, gives us one whole. So calc plus thumb diameter. Okay? So now you can see how it moves all the way to there. But we also want to move that output element. So we are going to compute a position that depends on the track width. So the position, we're only going to compute it here. So first off, we're going to compute a range, which is going to be the maximum minus the minimum, and then we are going to compute a position, which is going to be the difference between the current value and the minimum divided by the range. Okay, and all of it multiplied with the track width. So now you are going to see that if we add that position here, right? Okay, something's wrong because oh, that's what's wrong. Oops. Okay. Oh, yeah, something else is wrong. So these, right, were between parentheses there. Okay, like this. So now it moves with the thumb. The value moves with the thumb. That's good. Nice. But you can see how those tiny lines that we had at first, before setting WebKit appearance to none, those tiny lines disappeared. So we're going to need to add them again using the option. So we're going to have something like a before. And in case you're wondering why I'm using a before and I'm not using a background up here, that's because when this gets small, right, and it resizes, we are going to have subpixel rounding for the gradient. So we could totally do those ruler lines with a gradient, but when we have subpixel rounding for the gradient, things don't look so well, and I want to avoid that. So we are going to use a before on each of these for the major ruler lines, and we are going to use a gradient for the other one, but yeah, we are going to get rid of the minor ruler lines for smaller viewport sizes. Okay, so here obviously we're going to have content nothing, content nothing. We are going to set some ruler values. So for example, ruler line thickness is going to be 1 pixel, and then we are going to have a major ruler line length, which is going to be, I don't know, something. Okay, so we're going to use those for the dimensions. So ruler line thickness, and for the height, so that's going to be the length, and we're going to set background current color, and you see those lines, and here we're going to have box shadow inset right, and we're going to have 0 offset, and ruler line thickness, right, current color. But you can see how this extends too much outwards. We don't want it to extend past 0. So we are going to limit the width of this. So its width is going to be limited to calc track width plus 1 ruler line thickness. Okay, because this extends by half a ruler line thickness beyond the track width, okay, both left and right. So by half left, by half right, which is why we add 1. Okay, now having done this, let's do a few prettifying touches. So cursor east-west resize, and we can do cursor pointer here, right? And as I said, we're going to want to have background and linear gradient 90 degrees, current color, ruler line thickness, transparent 0, right? And then we're going to have repeat X, and we're going to set the background size this is going to be track unit divided by 5 horizontally, right? And vertically it's going to be half the ruler line length. So we want them to be half of what those are. Okay, it's starting to look like something. There's something for the output that I don't like about positioning. Let's explicitly set the width here to track width. Okay, and in this case we are not going to need to add the track unit there, to add half the track unit. Okay, okay, so so without the position it's minus 50%. Let me just see that. Let's set the background gold. Okay, so that's at the start. Okay, so it doesn't matter what I set for width. Okay. So, I can just get rid of that, right? Okay, half a thumb diameter minus 50%. That puts it in the middle there, plus position, right? Okay, I think that does it, right? Okay, now having done this, let's get rid of that gold background. And I think that having done this, we can just move this from the form, we can move it to the option right here. No, we can move it here, because here we're using it. And let's turn that ugly square into a triangle. Let's take care of that. We are going to create another mixin. And of course we could just hard code the values, but I just want to show you the generic thing. So regular polygon, and the default number of vertices is going to be 3. The default offset angle is going to be 90 degrees, right? And then we're going to compute a base angle, which is going to be 360 degrees over n, right? And we're going to have a list of vertex coordinates, which is initially empty. Then we're going to have a loop, so for I going from 0 all the way up to n, right? We are going to compute the current angle, which is going to be the loop index times the base angle plus the offset angle. And then we are going to add new coordinates to the previous coordinate list. Okay, but now I just want to show you something, how you construct a regular polygon. So the basic thing, without an offset angle, we start from 3 o'clock. Now our offset angle being 90 degrees, we go 90 degrees clockwise, which brings us to 6 o'clock. So we're going to start from there. Now let's say we are going to have 3 vertices, right? We divide the 360 degrees of the circle, right? We divide them into 3. So 360 over 3, that gives us a base angle of 120. Now the first vertex is going to be at 0 times 120. The second one is going to be at 1 plus 120. The third one is going to be at 2 times 120. Okay, now if we add the offset angle, basically we're going to have 90 plus 0 times 120, 90 plus 1 times 120, and so on. Okay, and the thing is, we can get those coordinates. So the coordinate of a point is going to be along the x-axis, is going to be the radius. Now in this case, this circle tightly fits into this square. So the radius of the circle is going to be 50% of the square, right? And its center, right? Its center is going to be at 50%, 50%, because this is going to be 0% horizontally, this is going to be 100% horizontally, 0% vertically, 50% vertically, 100% vertically, okay? So now the coordinates, we're going to have the previous version plus the coordinates we add at this step. And for this, we are going to need to use a SAS module so that we can have trigonometric functions. So 50% the x-coordinate of the center plus 50% the radius times cosine of the current, I cannot type, the cosine of the current angle, and we can actually bring that 50% in front, right? So bring 50% in front, and all within parentheses, and the exact same thing for the y-coordinate, except we are going to have sine instead of cosine. Now here we are going to have a polygon which is going to use those vertex coordinates, and for those browsers that still need this damn thing, okay, now here we're going to include let's see it. You can see we have a triangle, and for example we could have more vertices. Let's say we have 5 vertices, and it's going to look something like this. And yeah, it's easy to change. Similar if we want to have 6 vertices, right? But in this case we're going to go back to triangle. Okay. Now we can collapse this, and we can collapse this as well, right? So things look pretty good, except for when, let me just, you can see when it shrinks, how that gradient doesn't look nice anymore. Those tiny ruler lines don't look nice anymore. So we are going to get rid of them when the track width, the practical track width, becomes smaller than this base track width. So we're going to have a media query, and we're going to have so an extra large, which is initially 0, right? And then we're going to have media. So if is the track width, right, plus twice the thumb diameter, then this extra is 1. And we are going to only display these grid lines if that extra is 1. So we're going to make their height depend on the extra. Okay, and we're going to need to interpolate this, because otherwise it's not going to work. Right, so let's see it. You can see once it starts shrinking. Now, one more thing I want to show you. Now they get too crammed, right? And we don't like that. So we're going to make them disappear. We're going to make those, the 10, 30, right? 50, 70, 90, we're going to make them disappear if things get too crammed. So we're going to have another. And this whole idea of using custom properties, which we switch in a media query to control other properties. I explained it in this dry switching article, which is going to be linked. Okay, so we're going to have a large, and this is initially going to be 0, and here we're going to have something similar, media query, right? But this is going to be above 320 pixels, for example, and large is going to be 1, and we're also going to have not large, which is going to be, it's complementary. So if large is 0, not large is going to be 1. If large is 1, not large is going to be 0. So it's basically 1 minus large. Okay, there's this huge lag in between what I'm typing and what gets shown on the screen. So, like this. And here we are going to have a multiplier, which is going to default to large at first. So multiplier, which and here the width is going to be calc, that multiplier, times the track unit. And then we are going to have that for odd, for odd. So for the even ones, right, which means the second one, the fourth one, the sixth one, right, for these, m is going to be the value of large, which is either 0 or 1, right? For the other ones, m is going to be 1 in the large case and 2 in the not large case. Okay, so here we are going to have m, which is going to be large, so 1 in the large case, plus 2 in the not large case. Now, having done this, let's see it. You can see how it shrinks. Okay, and yeah, they have, but they're still showing up, right? They have a width of 0, but they're still showing up. So we're going to have to set transform, and we're going to have scale, and this is going to be, oh, not the right key, the minimum between 1 and m. So if m is 1 or bigger, then the scale factor is going to be 1. If m is 0, the scale factor is going to be 0. So now if we shrink this, you're going to see how they just disappear because they scaled down to 0. And we could also add a transition, but everything is just so laggy on my laptop right now that the transition is probably going to look super laggy, but we're going to add it anyway. Transition, transform. Like, even typing is super lagging now. Sorry, but I'm on a laptop that's more than 15 years old, so it is what it is. Okay, now having done this, and one more thing, since I'm adding a transition, transform origin 50% horizontally and 0 vertically, so they shrink to the top. Let's see it. Yeah, the transition and everything is laggy. It's probably going to look better on your system, but for now I have so many tabs open and all of that. I think I could just close some of them. Maybe that's going to help. I generally don't keep many tabs open, so yeah, maybe it's better now. Or is it just the fact that I'm recording? That may have something to do with it as well. Now, I could leave it at this, but the thing is, when I shrink it even more to something like this, you can see how it starts to look really bad and awkward again. So we are going to do something else. For the really small size, we are only going to show the first, the last, and the middle one, that's 50%. So we are going to add a mid class, right, here for the middle item. So class, this is going to be if I is half of n, then add a min class, otherwise null. So let me just show you the compiled code. You can see how this one gets that min class, which is great. Okay. Now we are also going to have a small here. So it's going to be very much like the large. Okay. Click there, like that. And just replace a large with small there. Actually, let's also copy paste this, and we are going to replace in a lot more places at once. and this is going to be max. Right, and this, and this, they're all going to be small. Okay, so like this. Now, oh, come on. Okay, now here we're going to need to also take into account not small, right? So it's going to be not large and not small. Okay. And let's copy paste this because it may be simpler. This is getting super laggy and I'm kind of regretting just going so much in depth with all of this because there's such a huge lag between me typing and stuff actually showing on the screen. Okay, no. Okay, this is just not, it's not reacting anymore. Okay, come on, this is the coolest part. And this is just not, okay, not what I had in mind. Come on, delete. First child, last child. Come on, type it properly. Okay, almost. I almost got it right. Typing in blind. Okay. Okay, let's. Okay, and let's put this. One less. So this is going to be within parentheses. Okay, and at the start we're going to have 2 times in the case not small, and then in the small case, right, in the small case we're just going to have 3. So the width for 1 is going to be the track width divided by 3 minus 1, so divided by 2. So it's going to be half of n, basically. Let me, so times small. Okay, and then we're going to have something similar for mid, except mid is not going to show in this not small case, right? So now no. Oh, it's reacting. Nah. I just had this illusion that it was reacting faster. So here we're just not going to have this not small because we don't have the middle one, the 50 one, we don't have it in the not small case. So let's get rid of it there, right? And now it should work, and we can basically just get rid of those parentheses because they're not really needed. Let's see it. So we have the extra large case where we have those small lines, and then in the large case, right, it starts to shrink, those small lines disappear, but we still have all the values. And then in the medium case, right, even a bit more, right, we don't have the 10, 30, 50, 70, 90 values. Those shrunk. And then in the small case, okay, the mid, okay, so the mid, okay, so for some reason this isn't applied, so option mid, okay, so for some reason this doesn't get applied, and I just don't get why, because, oh, I said min class, not mid. Come on, let's get out of the compiled view. Mid. So this should do it. Right, so the really small case. Oh, no, 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 no. Don't go there. Even smaller than this. Okay, so it's going to look something like this. One more thing, and this is going to be absolutely the last thing I'm setting here, because okay, so yeah, this is it. I'm going to stop it here because it's getting super laggy. It's probably going to work better on your system. Check it out. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, if you like the work that I'm putting out for 10 years now and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting it. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon, or if monthly support is not your style, there's the option of a one-time donation. Or you can make the stray cat happy with a gift of her wish list. Or you could at least share this to show the role what can be done with CSS these days, because honestly, I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully sooner than in a month from now. Bye.